Yeah, I will say that every year that I mean, because I'm a bit of a hawk when it comes to like lot content and first of the season and all that stuff, and I'm always excited to see what you guys are putting out every year because what I know is and I'm going to speak very personally here as far as taking in
By
your
all means.
taking in your stuff. Um, I can't identify what it is about your stuff that is that I where I can honestly say that's a Macintosh book, but I can feel it, like I can sense it, right? So that's really interesting to me because I think other designers have more there are more identifiable sort of tendencies and
Yeah,
things.
I
Um,
agree.
but then on top of that, what I know that I will always get from you that I don't get from anybody else is something visceral. There will always be something any year that I pick. There will always be something that feels like there's something more there. There's something in that I'm just responding to, not intellectually, but viscerally. And that's why I was asking you about what your drive is, because I think that some people can be very technical and technicians and they hone their craft and they know what they do well and all of that stuff, but I know you're expressing things. you know I don't know how aware you are specifically of what you're expressing, but I know that there's something there being expressed, and I really appreciate that, because that's rare
Thank
when
you.
you look around. And so I also asked some people, because you and I share some students in common, Austin Collins and Peter Lanier.
Austin.
Yep,
Yeah.
some recent guys.
Yeah.
And so I asked them. I let them know that we were going to be interviewing you,
Love those guys.
and they hopped
Miss
in.
those guys.
So they hopped in the group chat and they asked the boys what what to ask you about. And one of the questions that had come up was, what do you think it's like? I mean, you talked a little bit about getting the gig of being a composer, right? Do you think there's much of a difference now for a young composer trying to get that gig versus back when you got it?
I well, I think there's a lot that's different. I think the guys these like everything else because of the access to content and information, I think people are better, believe it or not. They have more access to tools, so their coping mechanisms as a composer are really refined, at a younger age, just like, you know, watch Chino Hills. I mean, you see this little child and he's in line getting a Coke, and then you see him, he's in the snare line at Chino Hills. He looked like a ninth grader, and now he looks like, it's like, wow, an entity. So these kids have access to information, and there's such a transparency amongst via communication, lines of communication, Insta, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, Zoom, and text, and it's like they have access um, to the brand. Like they can vertically integrate. They can be in control of every aspect of what they're doing as a brand, themselves as a writer, and they have access to people. I mean, they have a huge network, so the networking is off the charts. The access to information is off the charts. Back when I was doing it, or when I was breaking in, it was right place, right time. Brad asking me to be a part of the Cavaliers, after he saw Carmel at a at a Des Plaines show in Chicago. And then, getting a chance to talk to, John King at Zildjian and getting in with the right people, Mark Branson at Remo. And, I think that you've got people, I'm 51 and I'm one of the younger people. It's crazy. You've got myself and Colin, Lee Bettis, we're all right, our very early 50s. And, the we've been doing it for a long time, and there's a lot of experience there. I mean, Scott's the deity. Scott gets it. I mean, Scott He's got 28,000 followers on Instagram. He understands how to control the narrative, and he understands what's cool. The Blue Devils come out every year, and they are cool, man. They always bring something new to the table. And I don't mean to sound like a homer, but, those guys are the freshest thing out there. And they've got the skills to pay the bills. They've got the wide receivers and the quarterbacks and the DBs. You know, Santa Clara Vanguard, what Paul is doing over there, he's got his system, and it's incredible. The Church of Paul, and it's, here's the church, here's the steeple, open it up, and here's the Fred Sanfords. There's like,
Yeah, that's
you
a good
know,
way to put it right there. That's
seven of them, eight of them. Him and Sandy, I mean, they have their way of doing things. And, I don't have a set way. I don't know what I sound like because I sound different. I don't try to sound different. I just write what the music calls for. I try to write, what gives you the most feeling. And I think what George was talking about is there's a sense of vulnerability, I think, when I write, because I'm not scared to try stuff and not scared not to try things. And I think that's what keeps me in the game with all these up and coming young composers who are incredibly talented. I think it's opening up. I think you're going to have more quality instructors and composers, especially when this first round of SCPA students kind of start to migrate and make their way into the teaching, which they've already started to do. What Mike Jackson and those guys have done. Mike Jackson is another absolute hero of mine. Kevin Shaw, Mapes, Ian, obviously all those guys out there. Wonderlick, Vega, Pete Sappin, and just huge fan. But, I think that those of us that have been doing it for this long, Scott Johnson is the absolute, example of this, is there's a way to stay fresh because you're having fun and you're giving it back and you're doing it for all the right reasons. And I think that's something that maybe not everybody understands these days because it's kind of easy to get a gig because, there's more groups, there's more gigs for one, with so many winter percussion groups doing soundtracks for Color Guard, doing, percussion accessory stuff or accompaniment for, indoor winds. So there's a lot of gigs out there for sure. I think it's probably easier to, and it's easier these days to be a percussionist as a composer because you've got a lot of a non-saturation of gigs, you've got much more social access, and you've things have just progressed. I like to think about drumming, and I think Scott and maybe Paul and Tom Hannum and those guys think about it the same way. To me, it's skateboarding. It's a progression. So you're just trying to always push that progression. Great artists borrow, good artists borrow, great artists steal. Upside Down Tenor Thing 2011. I saw Matrix do it in the spring with one snare. I thought, maybe should we try this? I got a call from Jack Hallway on Water Break where the quads were doing early move-in. He showed me how they did it. I sent that video to Michael Gaines. It was in the show 3 days later. Did I rip off Matrix? Absolutely. I certainly did. I loved it, and I took what I liked, and we made it our own. So yeah, that's how you grow. You take a little bit of the patchwork of what you like from everybody else. You infuse it through your integrity as a writer, as a composer, and you got the cojones to put it out there and be vulnerable and let people judge your art, and then someone takes something they like from that and they make their own thing, and that's how our ashes are part of this whole process over and over and over.
so after Blue Coat, you end up back at Cavaliers, and you just touched on 2011, the extraordinary show, and 2010, the Mad World, which is an epic show in its own. Were you part of that design process of those shows, or it's like, here's what we're doing, here's the book, write to it, or?
No, it was 20. There were so many things that went crazy in '09 with upper level personnel leaving the Cavaliers that Scott Coder had his hands full. He basically, we met. Michael Gaines is a genius, and we're originally going to go with another title. I can't remember what that title was, but the show was kind of a Seinfeld show. It was about nothing, but it was about everything. So there's a lot of angst in there, a lot of synesthetic kind of vibe. And it was the first year that they allowed amplification, or excuse me, electronics. So in '05, Blue Coats, we pushed the edge with doing some tabla speak and the drum solo. And then in 2010, I wanted to blow it up. And so it's funny, Tom McGillen, who's the godfather of all the sound systems, sent me an email, and in the subject line, all caps, it said blow up DCI. So I'd reply. So in that folder was like 37 emails with blow up DCI. Like, we just wanted to push it as far as we could. So we did the pre-show. I remember working with Drew. I found that Pat Metheny tune. I said, this could be really cool. We can do the samples. And going back and forth on that tune, the This Is My Rifle, the middle of the show with the sopranos mic'd at the end just wailing. We didn't know it was going to be the barn burner. You know, you really never do. We thought it was going to be really good, but watching the crowd start to stand up in the Texas tour, and we started getting our act together, it was like, wow, we got a real gem here. So I remember the April camp, Michael Gaines and Bart Woodley and Andy Toth came into the band room, and I wanted them to hear the show, because I had just started learning Logic. I had written I was commissioned to write a piece for a group going to Midwest, and they wanted me to do a piece for what would be tape and percussion ensemble, which is basically digital soundtrack. So I said, I'll do it. So once again, I made a decision. I wasn't scared. You know, it was foolish, but I, tried it. I was like, I'm going to learn Logic, and I'm going to write this piece at the same time. And it's only going to be premiered at Midwest, percussion ensemble, no pressure. So that piece was Bloom. It was like a life in the day of a flower and 3 movements for digital soundtrack and tape. And I remember we were rehearsing it, and Shi Wu was listening. We were at Northwestern, and she was giving me some feedback. So in order to edit the file, my laptop wasn't strong enough. So I had to take a cab to Michigan Avenue and go to the Apple Store right there in Chicago. And I would literally jump on their bad boy computer with my headphones, like jump over the velvet rope and get on their bad ride. And I would edit the thing. So I really got into electronics because, 1968 was the end. Husa, that was the end. That piece, that was kind of the last music for Prague. Is the beginning of something else. And once again, we're at Cracker Barrel on Sunday. We look back. This was what was happening. But we had a foot in both seasons right now with acoustic and electronics. So I just wanted to. It was the language of the youth, so I wanted to be a part of it. So I learned Logic. I wrote that piece for Midwest, and I wanted to just blow up DCI with electronics and push it as far as we could. And that's what that show was. We actually had done some sampling of of Brant and of Dan Potter, and put that into our pre-show. I mean, we had done that first, and we ended up not using it. But all of the This Is My Rifle stuff at the end, and the way we utilize the electronics. The Mylar drums at the beginning, Brian Tinkle, teaching all that technique, and Michael Gaines having the ability to get them back to the Mylar drums without even seeing it, and then bring them forward, and then transition them back again. And like Jay Webb, who's an incredible judge, is like, I didn't even see it. We just wanted to really make things special. 2010, 2011, same thing with Mad World. That was one of their shows where the music talked to me, and it said, let's go minimalism. You're going to base this whole show, and you can take this information, and then you can go back to 2011 and listen to the book. It was all based off ba, ba, ba. Just those 3 notes, dotted quarters. 1, 2, and 4. It's everywhere around the book. And I'd worked on a drum break for about 3 hours. I was getting ready to turn the computer off. And I was sitting at WGI Finals, and I had my phone with me, and I sang this idea. I had this little, I would sing ideas, or I'd write them down on my phone. And I went, ka, 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 ka. And that was it. I think it was during like Ayala. Set it down, and I thought, well, what the hell, I'll take a chance. So I trashed that drum break. I'd worked on it for a couple hours. And I wrote that decrescendo, diminuendo, de excel rim shot thing. And then that became a theme throughout the book. And that was the thing people locked into. You just never know. Again, the universe was saying this, and I was like listening and going, okay. So very minimal book. But again, we had just incredible talent that year, and we're just lucky enough to win a Fred Sanford that year.
So DCI Finals 2011, they announced the high percussion, the Cavaliers. I mean, can you talk us through that feeling for you when they announced that?
I was happy. My wife videotaped it. My wife's so cool. She put the camera on the ground until they announced, because she didn't want to videotape my sadness if we had lost. I fell in love with her again that night. I just thought that was so sweet. But we had lost drums by 2/10 in prelims, and I was like, oh well, we had a good year, and it was weird. I'd accepted it because I just felt good about how we had pushed things. And then we were at Basie's that night, and Brian Tinkle came up to me Friday night and said JJ had us 2/10 up, and I was like, ooh, okay, check, going to bed. And that night it was just really special. They had a great performance, and I was reading Jeff's body language, and I just felt Jeff was into it. He was walking. He had his recorder, and you could kind of tell he was slyly recording the dudes hyping, and I thought that's a great sign. He picked up on all the compositional things we were doing. We had an amazing front ensemble that year, just incredible. And when they called that out, I felt like, it's just an award. It doesn't take the place of 1,000 hours of thinking and rewrites and sweat and tears and beers and critiques and hoes and fun and eights, but it did justify. I don't know. I felt like justified that I had done something special with the team. The team had done something special. We had put the Cavaliers back on the map. I had etched my name on a trophy that there's not a ton of names, which felt great. And I was lucky enough to be the first float kid that went and did their own program and won drums, and that meant a hell of a lot to me as a tribute to Tom and what he taught us. And that was real special. I think the biggest thing about it was being Tom's first kid to go out and do it on their own, specifically. Yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah, you mentioned it's really a select few that actually reach that pinnacle of winning high percussion. So, that's
it's so planets and right place, right time. It's like I picked up a piece of gum that wasn't mine and threw it away. Karma went around the world and came back, and I don't know. It was real cool. Yeah, it was special. You felt, I don't know. You didn't feel vindicated. You more felt like you're now. No one can take that away from you. You're part of a real club that has given a lot to the activity.
100%.
So you mentioned electronics coming in around. Was that 2010 was the first year for the electronics?
2010.
Yeah, so the electronics come in, and now, flash forward to now throughout this last decade, you have the drumline doing a lot of the body movement stuff. You ever trip out like on the pushback you get from older alumni? Like being an old alumni for me, I just kind of laugh, but it's just funny to see people lose their minds over electronics and the body movement.
Like what? And what? If we're doing it right, and someone's hating it, you're really doing it right. Look back in the 70s. There weren't a lot of dudes dunking the basketball. And Dr. J and Jordan, Moses Malone. They changed the game. It's evolution. Look back at skateboarding. Street was not that big, and all of a sudden, street took off, and then they started applying all these street tricks to the vert ramp, and it took off. There was a progression. It's just a natural progression. It's what kids like to do, and it's harder to do this body, and it's harder to do this choreography in these listening environments, which are now normal. That I would have bitched about. Like all up and down, seeing some of these spreads that we're asked to play in, which are just normal spreads now. But I just think it's a progression, man. And there's a real respect that DCI and WGI have, like to the point of not having any camps after the January audition camp, doing everything virtually like we have the last couple of years, so no one's missing anything. And respecting WGI. And I think WGI has pushed the activity. It is the premier. It's the premier, artistic art form of drumming, because you can try so much. And I tell you, it's because you're always the melody in winter drumline. You're always the melody. There's not a lot of moving parts. So you can push as far as you want to regarding compositional vocabulary, visual vocabulary, simultaneous vocabulary. And, I think that I have a healthy respect for what those people do, because demand is inherently on the DCI sheets. Really, if you want to win drums, your color guard's got to be in the right spot, and the horn line's got to have their absolute act together. If you dot those, check those boxes, then you're going to be probably going on pretty late. You're going to have a chance to be in the mix. So, it's a lot of give and take. You got to pick and choose your battles, many more moving parts in DCI. But as far as anybody hating on the choreography and stuff, man, that's breathe in, breathe out, yin yang, above water, below water, boom, bee, boom, ba, boom. There's a balance there of love and hate, and you're going to have that on both sides. And that's just part of the game, man. That's just part of the game.
I'm sure there were people that hated on 14-inch snares when they first came out compared to. Like,
oh yeah, I mean, this
15-inch,
guy, like Chicken Little ran inside when we went to 3-valve bugles. It was like, oh my god, So
The irony, because I remember, like especially like let's say specifically, let's talk about Blue Devils, and I'm sure this was the same when you were there. It was never just about learning what was already known, right?
right,
If anybody showed you anything, what did you do to it? You played it faster. You played it off the left. You moved around the accents. You did all that stuff. That's about progress. That's about evolving.
evolution.
Absolutely.
For the young percussionist that wants to audition for the Cavaliers, what are you looking for when someone comes to an audition?
We're looking for talent, the ability to progress regarding like what we're asking them, how we're asking them to look, how we're asking them to hit the drum. Someone that's organized. I mean, drum corps it's expensive, and there are a lot of moving parts to membership. So we're looking for talent. We're looking for preparation. Someone's got great tempo control. We can teach them the chops and we can teach them the flash. If they've got good timing, I mean, that goes a long way in my book, because that's kind of that skill you can't teach on finals week when the cream's rising to the top. You know what I mean? And your all-stars, your talent is getting more consistent. Your thoroughbreds are rising, kind of thing, and you're kind of seeing just how good those guys are. So we're looking for someone that has their act together from a playing standpoint. The visual component is a part of it. We have a visual. We have a great tech in Forrest Budway. He does the visual, and we take that much into consideration regarding how they move. You got to be able to move and play these days. And then we really look for who's got their act together regarding time management and maturity, turning their assignments in on time, the weekly assignments, and improvement. And we put them out there like we do at Survivor style, where there's a red line, and if your name is above that line, you're in. And that next week, if that order changes and you're here and there's 1 week to go, you've got 1 week to get yourself on the right side of the line to be on the right side of history, so to speak. So it's important to make sure that these performers understand what's expected of them, and we get a good feel for that as we audition them initially, and then as we kind of go through time. And then there's the financial side of things. How are you going to raise the money to pay for dues? Because that money stress can weigh heavily on a member. When we're learning choreography in early June, and they still got due struggles and it's on their mind. So those are all things that we take into consideration. The drum corps thing has gotten very serious regarding the health and wellness of the membership, which is amazing. So we look for those members that understand how to stay healthy and are going to be able to take care of themselves and are mature on and off the field. And it doesn't hurt if they can play their way through everybody at a high tempo off the left. But yeah, and they got to have great hair. I mean, you got to have great hair to be in the Cavaliers. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
Now it seems like you have to have a great facial hair to be in the Cavaliers.
Yeah, that was cool. They've always been real. I think in the early 2000s they allowed like a goatee or a mustache, but then it was when the Shakos came off in drum corps, and people started, and this is a WGI thing. People started performing with their whole bodies, their face, became their expression, very color guard, because there was nothing hiding. There was no Shako. Once that happened, and we did the wrong side of the tracks, it was like, okay, we're going to really do this, and this character, we're going to become this character. And it really, the guys became, these degenerates. They became these people that were fighting for what they thought was right. And it was a full body thing. And we let them, they looked good. I mean, with the pencil mustache, with the, I mean, they really got into it, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was
really
cool to
cool.
see them get in the character. I was fortunate enough to be there finals night, and it really helped sell the show. All the extra
Yeah,
stuff that they put into that. So
yeah, we had a great group of guys, and we've started to kind of get this lineage of tenor drummer from the West Coast. Peter was one of the first ones, and I turned on Austin to that, and so we've had this talent, and it's just so cool seeing the Cavaliers in Pulse and in Matrix and in Music City Mystique, because you're getting like A-list kids, and they're getting a great education at the Cavaliers. They're getting a great education in WGI. So that's been just really, a really cool thing. We would obviously love everybody from the West Coast, to take a chance and come out in March for sure. But that's been really cool. That's been really cool.
real quick, also here before I know I don't want to keep you here all night, but I wanted to show you something. When my daughter started drumming, we were going out trying to find some stuff for her to play, and one of the first things, like the first pair of drumsticks I bought her were some Mike McIntosh, some drumsticks. I don't know why she scribbled out the drum company, but there's some Mike McIntosh. I want to say they're innovative drumsticks, and that was like the
They
first
are.
drumsticks I bought her
Those are the
as a
Arena
younger
series.
drummer. Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate that. Those sticks feel incredible. I mean, I love those sticks. That was the first stick I designed. That was the indoor stick that we actually used in one of the productions in 2002. Brett was cool enough to, let another imp work its way in there with IP.
Who are your sponsors now? I mean, who do you endorse?
Yeah, I'm a Yamaha guy. I've been a Yamaha guy since 2000. Been a Zildjian guy since 2000. I've been with Evans since 2004. Evans had 7% of the market share, 4% of the market share back in the day, and now they've got a huge chunk of that. But I tell you, I loved Mark Branson, who's now at Innovative. He was at Remo. Mark is one of the coolest people I know. I mean, he can look past the emotion of the companies and look at the person, and you don't get that a lot these days. So I was Innovative Percussion. I had the Field Series stick out. I had the Arena Series stick out. I had the Mizzle out. We were just in the process of coming up with I don't know if we were going to call it the Sizzle or something else, like a variation of the Mizzle. And I spent a year thinking about it and going back and forth, and I decided to make the switch to ProMark. I think when Daddario bought ProMark, I was very intrigued by that, because I love Yamaha because it's one-stop shop. You've got your, electronics, brass, percussion, everything is there. So for me, ProMark was a huge decision, and I actually said I'm not doing it. I'm not going to go to, I'm not going to do it. And I told them no, and they said think about it for a week. And I was like, okay. So I talked to my wife, and I said, I'm not going to do it. She said, well, tell me about IP. And I was like, okay, Eric Johnson, I watched him bring his first set of mallets up to Dr. Shatroma's office. We've worked together forever. I feel like Apple is getting into the game with ProMark. They took me to their facility where they cut the wood. They buy the wood, cure the wood, grade the wood, and then we follow those dowels to Houston where they make the drumsticks, and then we finish this incredible 4 days up in Long Island at their facility. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, I just wasn't feeling it. And she goes, when you talk about ProMark, your eyes sparkled. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go ProMark. I know that sounds crazy. I mean, I'd made a million lists and was just going to say no, but by the end I was like, I'm doing it. I'm going to go because I believe in her. I play my music for her. If I get a, it's cool if I get a, it's not good. And 99.9.99999.999% of the time she's right. So going to ProMark was a big deal. And they offered me, the offer was incredible. It wasn't like it was a ton more than, in fact, it was less than what IP had offered. But I felt like what I wanted to bring to the table and what I wanted to try and do with ProMark was they had the ability to do it. They have the financial capital to do the testing and to run the data, because data's queen, data's everything. And we're going to come out with 6 sticks. We're going to come out with a suite of products, which is, you know, really fresh in my mind. And those guys are all ears on the approach. And yeah, the new snare stick is done.
Well, Michael, we were happy to have you here on our podcast. Got any closing statements there, George?
It's just an honor, and you know, like I've said a number of times, getting the opportunity to interview people, have them come on that are icons in the activity and very inspiring for a lot of people, but then getting to know their story, you know, and to know what's going on personally behind that is always a treat. So we really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, I hope you guys understand that, you know, I have a ton of respect for your program, and you know, to me it's all about telling the truth, and then people can take what they want from that. So you know, being transparent for me is an important part of the gig. I hope you guys feel I'm trying to be as honest and open as I can, for sure. I am trying to be.
And we are definitely about hyping up the activity. As far as the Drum Corps Coffee Shop, that's always kind of been our thing, is to hype up the activity and, you know, hopefully bring back some of the older generation like myself and George back into the fold and hyping up what's going on now, you know. And with that, you know, Michael, thank you so much for being a guest. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Much respect. Stay safe.